Time for love again. Time for love again.
Thanks for checking out today's video. We're going to be talking about how we do some programming and how we set up Spikemark. My name's Christian, and let's jump into it. So what I have open here is what Spikemark looks like when you first open it with no default show and nothing else going on. This is when you start a new show, this is what it's going to look like. So a couple of things we want to point out here is currently I'm in the Jogging workspace. We have two others. We have the cues workspace, and this is where we'll write cues and run our show from. And we also have the presets workspace, which is where we can write cues and then save them off as presets. We'll look at that in a little bit. But first up, we're going to start with the jog workspace. So the primary focus of the jogging workspace is for, as you might guess it, jogging motors. We can see in the show that I have open at the moment is we have the push stick V2 already in here. And if I go ahead and if I click on this, we can see I now get a couple more options over here on the right in the properties pane. And then we can also see down here in the axis dashboard, it shows that I have this selected. So first up, let's imagine I also want to add another machine. And to do that, it's as simple as up in the menu bar, I can open the machine library, and I can pick the machine I want, and I can drag it and drop it. And now I have a second machine. So now I have two things I can work with here. So one of the first things I might want to do is change the name so it's a little bit more descriptive. So again, if I have it selected, so I've got the push stick selected, I can come over here to the properties, and I can give it a name like wagon. And when I tab out of the name, I can go ahead and see that it has been updated. Same thing with the curtain call. I've selected it over here. We can see it's changed over in the properties, and I can also rename that. Let's say I would call it panel 1. And after that, I'm also running, it's also good to point out, I'm also running in simulator mode, and I can see that up here in the show mode up in the top. If I was in live mode, this would be for when I want to connect to real machines. But because I don't have any real machines set up, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to stay in simulator mode, because then this gives me access to everything I could want to do for programming and testing things out without having to be connected to anything, any real motors. So now that I'm in simulator, I've added the motors, I've changed the names so they're a little bit more meaningful to me. The next thing I can do is I can either use the on-screen controls, or I'm also sitting here, I have our new console, which has physical jog controls as well. So I'm going to go ahead and I have my panel 1 selected, and if I want to jog it forward, I can press my jog, and I can run it forward, or I can run it reverse, and I can do the same thing on Spikemark down here with the local controls, where I can move it forward by pulling up on the slider, or I can select reverse and run it backwards on the slider. And it's that quick and easy to get up and running and moving motors just in Spikemark. And that's great, but now let's start adding in a little bit more. So let's say I know that my panel can run between 0 and let's say 500 inches, and I want to make that represented over here in our 3D model. So what I'm going to do is I'll select it, so we can see it's selected. It's got the blue outline. You can see it says panel 1 over here in the properties. Then I'm going to come down to my soft limits, and I'm going to change my max forward to 500. And then my min reverse, I still want that to be 0. So I'm going to leave that at 0. A couple other things I might want to do is I might want to help get my model to represent better what my actual stage looks like is I can also come down here and I can mess around with the schematic a little bit. So if I want to move the panel back on stage a little bit, I can drag it backwards. If I want to move it, change the distance from the center line, I can also move it this way or move it this way. And I'm using the sliders, but if you know the number, you can also just type in the number. Then there are some width, length, height parameters I can go ahead and change. So if I want to make it a little wider, a little taller, so it more accurately represents what I see on the stage, I've got all my sliders here to do that. I can also rotate the scenery. So if I rotate it, so let's say I really want it, it's more of a deck track situation instead of a curtain track, and I want it to show it that way, so I can rotate it around, and then I can move it down onto the stage, not onto the stage, onto the stage, like that. And now it looks more like what I have in front of me on the stage. The other thing that I can do, which is pretty cool, is if I have my artistic renderings for what the scenery might be, I can go ahead and I can add that to the model as well. I can pick, so if I click the little front, and then if I go to pictures, and I say this is my set, and I open it up, and there we go. Now my model looks exactly like I would see it on the stage if we had a giant duck on the stage. So moving on then, so now that I have my model set up the way I want it, it represents what I have on stage. Now let's go ahead and we can start doing some of the more interesting things. So we quickly showed off what the jogging is, but now let's say I want to have a couple of different positions that I know I'm going to want. I'm going to want an on stage, an off stage, and say center stage. And I'm going to want to be able to reference those all the time. So what we can do is we can create spikes, and this will allow us to save and reuse those positions over and over and over again. So one of the ways to do this is here in the jog workspace, I can grab the machine. So again, I'm going to jog panel 1. I'm going to jog it using the console or using the on-screen controls, and I'm going to move it into position. Let's say we like here, and this is going to be our new on-stage position. In the Access dashboard down here at the bottom, we have our little spikes section. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new one by clicking Add. It gives us this fun name here, which if you can't remember that long number, it's best to give it a meaningful name. So I'm going to go with On Stage. I'm going to tab over, and now in the value, I can either change it if I know what it is, or I know I jogged it to this position, I like this position, so I'm going to leave it as the 148, and I'm just going to tab, 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 and now we have a spike for on stage at 148. Let's say I know my off stage is supposed to be 0, so I can also do that, and then go off stage, and this time rather than just jogging there, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to type in 0 and tab, tab, and tab, and there we go. And now I see there are 2 spikes, on stage, off stage. Also, you'll notice in the visualizer, so I'm zooming in using the mouse wheel, I am panning by right-clicking and dragging, and then in the model we can see we now have our 2 spike positions. We have our on stage and our off stage spike. Let's go ahead and I'm going to use the console, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jog this a little bit farther. So I have it selected, I press my jog enable, and I'm jogging. And let's say, we'll just add one more spike, and we'll go here. And back to in the Access dashboard down at the bottom, I've got Add Spike, and we will just call this our playing position, and tab, because we like that. So now if I want to quickly and easily jump back to those positions, I could continue to jog it, or I can use what we call move to position. So this lets me create ad hoc little movements to get my motor in position where I might like it. So let's say I want to come back to our on stage position. If I select the spike and I can click load spike, and what this will do is this moves it over into our move to position window. So I have my position, I can input a speed. We'll go with the default here for this motor, which is 30, and an acceleration, deceleration of 15. This will give us a nice 2-second ramp. Next, I pick where do I want to run this on. So this will show up So right now we have our little drop down for playback 1, 2, 3, or 4. We'll talk more about these in depth in a minute here. But for now, I'm just going to go with playback 1. I can load it. And so now we can see on screen, I have in playback 1, we can see the go button has lit up. We can see we have a move to position loaded. And similarly on the console, we can see, it's hard to see in the light, but our go button has lit up. And we can see that the queue number is indicated on the dial. And for the moved position, the queue number is 0. And we can see that here. So now what I can do is I can press the hold to run, and then I can go ahead and press the, oh, I haven't configured a soft stop. There we go. So we can see, because I had my hold to run button here configured as a soft stop button instead of a hold to run, it stopped it and it unloaded it. So I'm going to reload that, press my hold to run, and then I'm going to press my go, and we can see that it starts to move. And once it gets to its position, it turns blue in the playback, it turns blue on screen, and if we get our completed status icon, and when I let go, we are now done with that move. So I used the console for that, but then I can also do it purely in Spikemark. I'll switch this back to soft stop, because without either a consolette or a console, there's no physical hold the run button. So I've switched that back into soft stop, and now I'm going to say, let's go ahead to our off stage. I'm going to load that spike. We can see our position has changed. We'll stick with those speeds. I'll load it. We can see in our loaded queue for playback 1, we have moved to position. We can see our go button has turned on. And if I press the go button, it'll now run to that new position. So this can be really handy, both move to position and local jogging here can be really handy for when we're trying to tech our show or in maintenance where we're not necessarily running our cue stack, but we need to get a motor to a spot so we can either work on it, tech some stuff, doing dress rehearsal with it, introducing it to actors, whatever the case may be. This is kind of what the jog workspace is designed for. Up until this point, we've just been running one thing at a time, but we also have the ability to do multi-selection and multi-jogging. So I can also go ahead and I can continue to add to my selection by clicking the little blue dot in the corner. And now we can see in the Axis dashboard that I have both panel 1 and wagon selected. And now this will allow me to either jog them, again, I'm using the console for this, or I can use the on-screen local control for this, to go forward, to go reverse, whatever I might want. I can also, again, do my move to position. So because none of the things I have selected, in this case, panel 1 and wagon, have the spikes that are the same name going to the same place, I don't see any show up in my list, but that's okay. I can just type in a position. So let's say I want to take both of these to 100 inches. I can type in 100. Both of them are capable of doing this speed, so that's okay. So I'll continue with that. I'm going to go ahead and I'll load it onto playback 1. We can see it says moving 2 motors down here, so that gives me an indication. I can see up here in the playback's control that playback 1 has something loaded on it, and I can go ahead and I can press my go button, and I can see both of those things are now moving. And so we can see it's pretty quick and easy to get things moving using these ad hoc move to positions or local jogging in the jog screen. But now let's go ahead and say we go ahead and start programming a show. So this will be the things that we're going to do all the time. We're going to be running in sequence, and this will be our show, right? So I'm going to switch over. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to deselect everything, and I use the escape key on the keyboard, or when you have something selected, there's the clear selection button down here. I'm going to switch over to the cues workspace. And before we dive too much into this, I want to break down the panels a little bit more here. So this is where playbacks really start to come into play. So what is a playback? We kind of got a little bit of a hint of what a playback is when we were doing the move to position, but a playback is really the place that we are running our cue. So by default, we have 4. This lines up nicely with the console, which also has 4 playbacks. Playbacks have a go button, a stop button, a live speed adjust dial, so we'll talk about that in a second, and then we have 4 of those, and this is mirrored in Spikemark with our 4 up here. If you don't have a console, if you have a consolette, the consolette will become playback 1, and in those cases we can also delete out the playbacks so we don't see the extra things we don't have. Since I'm using a console, I'm going to go ahead and add those playbacks back because I have 4. And one of the other things the playback has is the idea of this live speed adjust. So you can do it both in Spikemark and on the console. You can double click to reset to 100%. And what this is doing is we can either choose to speed up or slow down anything that's running on that playback. We can go all the way down to 0% and we can go all the way up to 200%. This can be handy for several different reasons. Let's say we program out our show and we really like our sequence, but now it's time to introduce the performers to it. We might want to slow that down as we introduce it to them without having to actually change our cues. So you can just turn it down, and now we're going to run it at 20% of the programmed speed. And this can be really helpful for when you start introducing it to the performers and building the confidence. And rather than having to adjust all of your cues and remember that you've done that, you can just turn down the speed. Similarly, if the show's going, skip a bunch of lines one night and we need to get the wagon to its position before they end the monologue, we can go ahead and we can bump up the speed a little bit by either dragging it or on the console, spinning the dial. We can see the numbers changing here, and it also adjusts in Spikemark, wrong mouse, in Spikemark. We can see it happen in both places. As I turn it up, it moves. And I can double click to get to 0. And so if we've skipped a bunch of lines and we need to get the wagon there, we can speed it up a little bit. Or on the other hand, if a bunch of lines were added and we need to slow it down so it doesn't get there too early, we can also do that. And again, either way. So that's kind of what a playback is. It's our place to run things. And the other nice thing about playbacks or having multiple playbacks rather, is that this allows me to do a couple of things. I can, if I want, I can choose to run all of my deck automation on playback 1, all of my flying automation on playback 2, and all of my lifting motion on playback 3, and then run my maintenance cues on playback 4. So I can break it up a little bit, and I always know, oh, if playback 2 is loaded, something's going to be flying. I can also do, if I know I have a tight sequence of things that have to happen, but they don't always happen quite at the same order every night, I can also load those onto the different playbacks, and then I have my 4 physical buttons to be able to press in whichever sequence it might happen in that night. And so so that's kind of the idea of what playbacks are. And so then the next question of, well, how do I use them and how do I program for them? So what that looks like is, let's say I want to add panel 1. We're going to start with panel 1. We want to bring this to our on-stage position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, from the access list over here on the left, I'm going to drag that over and hover over my Q1. And so this unfolds, and I now see that I have my 4 different playbacks. Let's go ahead and let's pick playback 1 for this. Now we can see Q1 is written, playback 1 is showing up. We're seeing our step number, so this is step 1, and then we're seeing our movement. So if I click on this, these will start to read like sentences, which will give me an idea of what's going on. So I open up, this is the movement editor. the, so I'm going to switch over to speed. I'm going to pick, I see my list of positions down here at the bottom. We'll say we want to go to our on stage, so we can see that'll switch it to our on stage. I'm going to pick the speed we want it to run at. 10 is fine. We'll do 2 seconds, which is half. We can see as we change our numbers, our trajectory graph changes. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to save those changes. And now we have written our first movement. Let's also go ahead and add the wagon to this. So again, I'm going to grab that, drag it, and drop it. Click on that one. And let's bring this to 50 inches. So I don't have any spikes for this, so I'm just going to use the position. We're going to say 50. We'll go ahead, let's pick a little bit of a slower speed. We'll go 24, 12, and 12. And go ahead and save those changes. And so now I've written my first cue with steps, with my first step in it rather. And so if we want to see what this looks like, we can go ahead and we have this load up here in the corner of the cue. So I can go ahead and I can load cue 1. I can see that I have the loaded cue on playback 1. We can see that the go button has lit up. We can see again on the console that I guess you really can't see, but the go button is lit up and it is pulsing. We can also see, so we're set at 86% speed. Let's go ahead and just set that back to 100. Then I can go ahead and I can press my go. We can see the progress that it's making as it's running, and then it turns blue, indicating that it has happened. We can also see that the go button has shut off. So that's great. So this is our first cue, and let's say this is our preset look. So let's go ahead and add another cue so we can do our first show move. So there's a couple ways to add a cue. We can right click, add cue, or we can use the keyboard shortcut Control U. This, when we click on Q2, we can now see this is our cue editor where we can pick the number. We can give it a name, so we'll call this first act. We can pick a color for the cue. Let's go ahead and pick this color here. And then if there's any specific notes about this cue that we want to make sure our operator is aware of, we can add that here. So let's say, first thing, watch out for, and when we go ahead and we save those changes, we can see the cue has changed to match that color we picked. We can see our name, and then we can see our any notes we may have added. So let's go ahead and we'll start programming these again. So if I grab panel 1, I drag it, I drop it, we'll continue to just use playback 1. And so now, because we created that first cue, we can see how these will start to read as sentences. So right now what it's saying is it's going to track off stage from the on stage position to 147.99 in 0.5 seconds at 10 inches a second. So let's go ahead and let's change this. Let's change panel 1. So I've clicked on it, got panel 1. Let's go ahead and change this to playing position. And let's go ahead and let's make this a little bit faster. Let's go 15, we'll do 15 and 15. And we can see that the movement graph here has changed as we've been adjusting those numbers. This is super handy because this kind of gives me an idea of, this is the top of the graph here is as fast as it can go. This line is as fast as it will is its top speed for this move. And then we can see we've got 1 second ramp for our A cell. We've got 1 second ramp for our D cell, and the deceleration starts at 13.5 seconds. And the total move is 14.5 seconds. So I'm going to go ahead and save those changes. Let's also go ahead and add wagon to this one, and let's send this one back to 0. And let's say, rather than typing in speed, A cell, D cell, let's say we want to program this with time. So let's say we want that to really take 5 seconds. So I've switched over to time at the top. I can say I want it to accelerate for 2 seconds and I want it to decelerate for 2 seconds. I can save those changes, and we can see over here in the cue list, we can see wagon 1 tracks off stage from 50 to 0 in the 5 seconds, and then it tells me what that real speed was. The important thing to remember when using time is that these absolute units, these engineering units, are the thing that actually gets saved in your show file. Which brings up a good point is we've started making a bunch of changes. We should save our show. So we'll go ahead, save our changes from our movement editor. We can close this window. I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to Save. I'm going to just put this on the desktop, and we'll call this Spikemark demo. And we'll go ahead and we'll save that. And now we can see up here in the title bar that it says Spikemark demo, which is the show file we are using. That's an important thing to remember. There's no autosave, so you want to make sure you are, as you're making changes, you are saving them, or you'll be sad if you lose power, like last week. All right, so now that we've saved our show file, let's keep programming. So we've programmed this nice cue, we make these nice moves, and that's great. But what if we want to make a little bit more complex motion profile? And we want to add on to this, so it's not just move to the one position. And let's say once they reach these positions, let's then move them again. And so to start stringing these things together, what we'll do is we'll use triggers. So triggers exist over here on the left under the axes list, and we have a couple different types. We have delay triggers, we have completion triggers, we have position triggers, and we have FX input triggers. Let's start with the completion trigger. So completion trigger is our little metal here. So I'm going to go ahead, and if I click, drag, and drop, I'm going to drag this onto the wagon here. So onto step 1, we can see I've now added this completion trigger. If I click it, there's nothing to edit. It just fires as soon as the step is complete. So step 1 completes and then triggers step 2. So let's add something to step 2 now. Let's go ahead, let's add the panel to step 2 by dragging that over, dropping it on the trigger. So now I can see I have the little 2 over here, and that's where, again, that's showing our second step. If I go ahead, if I click on this, that'll open it up so I can edit its motion. So it's coming from the playing position, and where do we want to send it? Let's send it to our offstage position. This is a larger move, so let's hurry up and get it out of the way. So we're going to go ahead, and for this, we're going to go with 30. We're going to go with 15 and 15. I'm going to go ahead and save those changes. Let's also add wagon to step 2. So again, I'm going to drag over wagon, drop it on to our step 2 here. Now I see wagon, I can click that, and I can now edit its properties. Let's also send this to mid stage. Let's go ahead and say 120 inches. Let's do this one a little bit slower. Let's say we want to go 24 inches a second. We want it to start quick, so we want a 1 second acceleration. So we can see 1 second, but let's say we want a nice slow deceleration. Let's go ahead and use 12. So this will give us a 2 second deceleration. Go ahead and save those changes. Now we can go ahead and we can preview what this will look like using the simulator. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to load it. So I use the little load icon, and I can now use the on-screen keys, or I can use the console. And again, I've turned off the hold to run. If I didn't, I would be pressing this button. Go ahead and press go so we can see they start to move. We can get the progress bars to get our rough idea for how much longer there is in this motion. We can see the completion triggers doing the same thing. Once step 1 has completed, we've now triggered step 2. And once this completes, we can go ahead and see that our Q2 has turned blue. We have this blue outline, and our movements are showing up as blue. So let's go ahead, add a new cue, and let's look at some of those other triggers as well. So completion is great if we know it's like do step 1, then step 2, then step 3. Let's say if we want to do something a little bit more overlapping. Let's go ahead and let's try out some, let's use a position trigger. So first up, we're going to add a new cue. And to do that, I right click and select add cue, cue 3. Let's go ahead, let's grab panel, drop that onto playback 1, so we can see it's coming from off stage. Let's go ahead and let's send this to 120 inches. Let's go 12, 12, and 12. Save those changes. Now let's say once it hits 60 inches, we want to start the wagon moving. So to do that, we'll use our position trigger. So that is our little tape measure over here on the left. And if you, again, grab, drag, and drop that onto the step 1, we can see and click this. Now we have some options. So first what we're going to do is we're going to pick our motor. So we want to watch panel 1. And once it hits 60 inches, that's when we'll want to trigger our second step. So we'll go ahead and save those changes. And now we can see this reads panel 1 reaches 60, then triggers step 2, which is exactly what we want. So now we can grab wagon, bring this over, drag it, and drop it onto our trigger to create our step 2. And now we can see this will be coming from 120 inches. Let's send this back to 60. And so we can see that my movement graph has turned into a triangle, which is indicating that it's not going to hit top speed that we have programmed. It's going to spend all of its time in the acceleration phase and all of its time in the deceleration phase. There's a couple ways to change this. I can either move the position or slow it down or speed up the acceleration and deceleration. So for us, we don't need to, we want it to be going to 60, so we'll just slow it down a little bit. So let's go to 24, 12, and 12. Now we can see we have a nice trapezoid again, and our top speed that we're going to hit is 24. So we'll go ahead, save those changes. And now if I load this and run it, we can see that panel 1 is going. We're at 40 inches. Once we hit our 60 inches, it now triggers our step 2. And again, once it's all complete, everything turns blue. All right, let's add another cue. Right click, add cue. And this time, instead of using a position, let's say we know after 3 seconds of the first thing starting, then we should start the next thing. So let's bring in panel 1. It's going to be coming from 120. Let's say we want to take this to 60. Nice and slow. Let's go 4, 2, and 2. We can see it's going to be a 17-second rather move. We go ahead, save those changes. Now we're going to add our delay trigger. So over here, again, under the axes, this is our little stopwatch. If we grab this, drag it, and drop it, we can see step 1 starts and then triggers step 2 after a 0-second delay. If we click it, we get the properties for it. And this is where we can pick our delay. And so this is in seconds. So the delay trigger starts as soon as the step it's in. So step 1 starts, and the delay starts from the beginning of that. So our delay is going to start from the beginning of step 1. So after 3 seconds, so we'll say 3. Then we're going to trigger, we're going to drag over wagon and drop it on there. And let's send this to 120. And we'll go 24, 12, and 12 and save those changes. So if we preview what this looks like, we're going to go ahead and load it. It turns red, shows up here. I'm using the on-screen buttons this time. I can go ahead and press go. We can see panel 1 has started. It was 3 seconds, and then we triggered our wagon. And we programmed panel 1 to be nice and slow, so that will finish up here. And there we go. And then quick show it off. I'm going to go ahead, add a new cue. I don't have an FX hooked up, so the FX input trigger is a little disappointing to look at. So we'll just grab panel 1 and grab our FX input trigger over here, which is our last one on the list. Drop it on there. So what this allows me to do is, based off of, I don't have any FXs to select because I don't have an FX in my show, but if I had an FX, it would allow me to pick the FX and then pick which input. So once that button was pressed, then it would fire the next step. So we can go ahead and save that. There was nothing to save. So then let's say, oh, we have added this and we don't really want an FX input trigger. We can either select it and click delete trigger to get rid of it, or if we don't have that open, if we grab it and start dragging, we see our little trash can icon, and if we hover over that, it'll expand and I can drop it there, and now we've gotten rid of that trigger. So let's use a completion trigger for this one. Let's add our wagon to that. And now let's go ahead and we'll edit our motion profiles here. So for panel 1, we're going to be coming from 60. Let's say we want to go to 120. We're going to go 12, 12, 12. Save those changes. Once that completes, then we want the wagon to go. And let's take this to 60. And let's go 12, 12, 12 for this one. We'll save those changes. Let's say after the wagon starts, we want to add a delay trigger. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. Click on that. We'll say 3 seconds. Save those changes. And then let's drag panel 1 back onto there too. And now let's send this also to 60. And we'll do this in 12, 12, 12, and save changes. And if we look at what this looks like, we can see that we can really start building out complex or more sophisticated rather motion profiles. The other nice thing, so besides just doing individual triggers like this, we can also do trigger stacking. This can be super cool. So let's show an example of this using the completion and the delay trigger. So let's go ahead, let's start with panel 1. We're going to be coming from 60 and we're going to be going to 120. We're going to go 24, 24, 24, save those changes. Now what I want to happen is I want this to complete, and then I want to wait 3 seconds, and then I want to move the wagon. So I'm going to stack my completion and my delay trigger. So to do this, I grab my first one is to complete, so I'm going to grab that. I'm going to drop that on there. So step 1 completes, then triggers step 2. Now this is where I want to wait the 3 seconds. So I'm going to grab my delay trigger, drag that over, drop that on. Step 2 starts, then triggers step 3 after click on that so I can get the editor. 3 seconds, save. And then I'm going to grab my wagon, pull that over. And now let's take this to also 120. And we'll go 24, 12, 12. So now what this looks like, if we go ahead and load this and run it. So we're going to move our panel. It's completed. We're now waiting our 3 seconds. And then we trigger our wagon. So being able to stack these triggers really opens up our possibilities. So we can do a delay before, delay after, just depending on how we stack these up. So besides just being able to drag and drop to program, we can also drag and drop to reorder. So let's say, oh, right now I have Q5 happening, but really, after Q4, but really I want Q5, it should be my last one. So if I grab Q5, the header, start dragging it, I can drop it under Q6, and this will reorder my list for me. So this can be super handy for reordering, is I can just drag it around to where it needs to be in the show. If I don't want to drag it around, I can also click on it on the queue and I can just change the number. So let's say, oh, really, this should happen before Q, so let's call it Q3.5. I can save those changes and that'll move it around. another way to be able to add things in between is, let's say I really want to add another movement for my panel between cues 2 and cues 3. If I grab my panel 1, I start dragging it, and I drop it. I drop the panel 1 after cue 2. That'll give me a new cue in that place with that motor. And then I can go ahead and let's run to 12 inches at 3, 3, and 3, and save those changes. And just that simply, I now have a new cue in between my existing cues. Another cool thing we can do is, let's say I've programmed all of this all onto Playback 1, but really I'd prefer this to be on a different playback. So let's say in cue 2, this should really be on Playback 2. I can just grab my whole playback and drag it over to Playback 2. Or instead, oh really, all of this stuff should really be in cue 2.5. I can grab it and I can drag it and drop it into cue 2.5. Similarly, if I don't really want in cue 2 on Playback 2, if I really would prefer this to be different playbacks, different steps, I can also just grab my step, I can drag it, and I can move it around. Let's say I want to take the wagon out of step 1 here, I can grab it, I can drag it, and I can move it around. I can't drop it onto somewhere where it already exists. It won't let me do that. But other than that, you can kind of drag these things around to where you want. The idea being is, I see the thing, I can grab it, and I can drop it where I want it. Another cool thing to point out is, let me add a new cue down here at the bottom. I can, in my cue notes section, if I want to so a couple things here quickly to point out too. So like the cue notes, I can add some formatting. So if I want to make something really known, I can use the bold and say like this is important, and then this will show up in the cue list more bold. So this can be helpful for notes. There was the question here about, can you have an access start after 3 seconds, after a 3-second start, second access, and then have them both finish at the same time? Is it just doing them to figure this out? The completion, for that instance, yes. If, however, so let me create in Playback 1, if I grab both of these, let me just change this so they're not actually going to the same position. So let's say that's at 80. And then let's say this is 150. And this is 20. So we can see that at the moment, panel 1 is going to take 6.3 seconds. And wagon's going to take 4 seconds. If I want both of those to complete at the same time, I can click my step time over here. And this, I can pick whether I want actual speeds to be the same, A cells, D cells to be the same, or if I want to program that in time. If I really want both of these to take, say, 8 seconds with a 2-second ramp up and down, and I can save those, and it'll change it that way. So we can see both of these are now going to take the same amount of time. But at the moment, no, we don't have a way to be able to do that across triggers. So another thing to point out is, let's say I know I need to move, say 6 feet, or I want to move to 6 feet, but I don't know, I don't want to do that math in my head. In the target window, I can go ahead and I can do math. So I can say 6 times 12, and it'll do the math for me. Also, if I say, like, oh, let's move another 3 inches and I don't want to do the math, I can go +3, tab, and we can use the target box here as a little calculator to help speed up. Similarly, subtraction and division work. So if you know your conversion factor and you're working in millimeters or inches or whatever, you can let the computer do the thing it's good at, which is calculating numbers. So the last thing to touch on here is, besides just making movements, we also have a couple of actions. And actions are a way to program Spikemark to be able to do things. So we have a couple different types. These exist on the left-hand panel, and these exist underneath the triggers. So we have motor properties, motor methods, and playback properties. So I'm going to add a new cue. If we go ahead, we're going to show off some motor property actions. So if I grab that, drag it over, and I click this, so this allows me to change some of the parameters for that particular motor. So let's go ahead, let's pick panel 1. Let's pick our scenery length, and let's go ahead and let's change the value to 10. So if I go ahead and I run this, we can see we've now changed the length to 10. Why is this useful? This can be super handy for if you're trying to keep the visualizer matching what's happening on the stage. So if you are changing out what is on the wagon, so scene 1, it's a giant house, and then scene 2, now it's a table, we can program that into the show to make the 3D model look like what is happening on the stage. So we always get that idea about how big or small the thing is. The other property that can be super handy is to be able to change the min or the max jogging percent. So let's say I have, again, it's that giant house, and for whatever reason, if I'm gonna put it onto the joystick to be able to jog it, I don't want to be able to move it that fast. I can limit that down by programming that right into the cue. So then if I get there and I go on the jog stick, I'll automatically be limited down. This comes in handy for like performer flying stuff in particular. So besides motor properties, we also have motor method actions. And so similar to the properties, we pick our motor. We'll go ahead, we'll pick panel 1, and then these are a couple different actions that I can take on that motor. So I can choose to soft stop that motor, activate, deactivate, and then if I'm using the compatible stagehand, I can do a 0-speed brake release and a 0-speed brake, and then I can do the 0-speed brake release, and then the opposite action there to re-engage them. So as an example, let's go ahead and we're going to just deactivate panel 1. So if we save those changes, I go ahead, I run this, so we can see panel 1 is active, and now we can see it's outlined in the black and it's gone to sleep. This again could be handy for, well, we are depending on what we're running tonight. If we know, oh, we're not going to run those, or we're done running this and we want to deactivate it, so our cues can still run. It can be programmed into our cues, but the cue can still run if it's been deactivated, versus if we just disconnect it, which is a fault, and then the cue won't be able to run. So if depending on what's going on stage, sometimes we deactivate this and we just run everything else. We can again program that in to the show, so we don't have to remember to do those things on a night-by-night basis. So I'm going to go ahead, select panel 1, and then over in the top, I'm just going to reactivate it for us using the little checkbox. And then lastly, we have playback properties. So that's our little P, and I drag that over. And similar to motor properties, playback properties allow me to change the values of the playback. So for instance, if I pick playback 2, let's say, and let's change its speed, and let's say we want to run it at 50. And I'll go ahead and I'll load this, and we can see our playback 2 speed has changed to 50. This can be super handy if we know we always want to be running, starting slow or starting a little bit fast, and we're going to tweak it live every night. Rather than having to remember to do that, we can program it in so we make sure it always happens. This is a little bit more than the basics, but I think it's a cool thing to show off. We talked about it, it's the 0-speed brake release. So I just want to show that off real quick. So I've grabbed the motor method property, I'm going to pick wagon 1, and we'll do the 0 speed brake release. I'm going to save those changes, and then I'm going to right click Q11, and I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to click that, and I'm going to change that one to the 0 speed brake engage. And if I save those, now I can go ahead and I can load, I can run. We can see we get the little hover icon on the axis, and then when I go ahead and I run the next queue where I have it programmed to re-engage them, now it goes away. The 0 speed brake release is really for being able to do nice smooth actions where we know we don't want the brakes to engage in between our steps. And so we can, again, using the compatible hardware, allows us to tell the motor to hold its position, flux and hold its position, and don't use the brake to hold its position. So keep it engaged, keep it positioning in between our moves. And this creates some really nice fluid motion. That's another good question here. So if your stagehand is running an older version of the stagehand card, it hasn't been upgraded, and it doesn't have the split A cell D cell, you will know that when it's connected. But if you want to do a bunch of this previs work, and for example, I'm going to go ahead and let me add, let's say we have a rotator. I'm going to drag that into our show. You can see I now have a rotator in the model. If I select the rotator and come over to the hardware section in the properties, so scrolling all the way down, there's a simulated hardware option, and by default it goes to asymmetric ramps. But if I switch this into symmetric ramps, this will then, I'm going to add rotator to Q13. This now doesn't let me change the D cell value, and will always just make it match what the A cell is. So if I know I'm not going to be connecting this to something that has that ability, I can change that property, and then I can program my show and not have to think about adjusting the D cells. The other thing is, in that specific instance too, is if you program it with split A cell D cells and then it connects to hardware that doesn't support it, it's just automatically going to take that A cell value and use that for the deceleration. Can't see the drop down. Fair point. All right, so there goes the console. So if I scroll all the way down to the hardware section, we can see there's this drop down for ramps. And if I change that from asymmetric to symmetric, that's how I do that. And then, so I think that kind of hits everything we were hoping to today. If there's more questions, I can go ahead and answer those. All right, cool. And then in that case, thanks for watching today, and hope to see you on the next one.